The dense jungle was alive with sounds of creatures unknown to the modern world. Ancient trees stretched high into the mist-filled sky, their gnarled roots twisting deep into the earth. Rurik, a seasoned archaeologist, stood at the entrance of a newly discovered cave, his eyes narrowed against the sweat trickling down his face. His expedition team had trekked for days, navigating treacherous terrain, and now at last they had uncovered what many believed to be a mere legend. He turned to his colleagues, his voice firm with determination. "This is it. This is the entrance to the Lost Valley, the cradle of the ancient world. Everything we've been searching for is beyond that door." The air was thick with anticipation as they stepped closer, the darkness within the cave both a mystery and a promise. What secrets lay inside had been buried for millennia, but soon they would uncover them. Inside the ancient chamber, the team stood in awe. The air was thick with the weight of history, and Rurik felt a strange sense of reverence as he looked around. The walls, covered in intricate murals, depicted creatures long extinct, while strange symbols adorned the floor. "These symbols," Rurik said softly, kneeling down to touch them. "They're not like anything we've seen before. This could be the key to understanding an ancient civilization that predates all known history." His voice was filled with both excitement and caution. "But we must be careful. These artifacts have been undisturbed for thousands of years for a reason." As the rest of the team explored, Rurik's mind raced with possibilities. He could feel the significance of this discovery deep in his bones. "This will change everything," he whispered. "The world has no idea what lies here, hidden beneath the earth." The morning after their discovery, Rurik and his team gathered at the base of the cave entrance, the weight of their findings still settling in. The air was cool, and the jungle around them hummed with life, unaware of the monumental discovery that had just been made. The group sat around a large stone, trying to piece together the information they had gathered, examining the symbols and artifacts. Rurik, deep in thought, spoke up. "This civilization, it's older than we imagined. These symbols, these aren't just simple markings. They're a language. And if we decode them, we might unlock knowledge lost to time itself." His eyes flicked from one team member to another, his passion evident. "The key to understanding the ancients lies here in these walls. We need to continue our work, but we must be cautious. There's more here than we can comprehend." His words were met with silence, but the excitement was palpable. As Rurik and his team ventured deeper into the cave, the temperature dropped. The air became thicker, heavy with the ancient secrets it had kept for centuries. They had discovered a series of chambers connected by narrow winding passages. Each new room they entered revealed more ancient murals, fossilized remains, and artifacts, but one room in particular stood out. The walls were covered with what appeared to be a map, but not of any territory they recognized. "This map," Rurik said, running his fingers across the smooth stone, "it's not of any known land." He paused, considering the implications. This could be the map of an entirely different world, one that existed long before the civilizations we know today. The team exchanged uncertain glances. They had uncovered something far beyond their expectations. And the deeper they went, the more questions arose. What civilization had created this map, and what had happened to it? As the team pressed on, the cave became increasingly labyrinthine, its passages narrower and more treacherous. The deeper they ventured, the more they encountered signs of an ancient civilization. Stone tools, carved idols, and animal bones that had been carefully arranged. In one chamber, they found something that made their hearts race: an altar surrounded by strange symbols and objects. The altar was made of stone, worn by time, but its significance was undeniable. "This," Rurik whispered, his voice filled with awe, "this is an ancient ritual site." He carefully examined the objects on the altar, a series of intricate carvings, a skull, and what appeared to be a ceremonial dagger. "These people," Rurik continued, "they didn't just live here. They worshipped something. And I think we're about to learn exactly what." The atmosphere in the cave shifted, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. As they continued their exploration, the team stumbled upon a hidden passage deep within the cave. It was narrow, barely wide enough for them to pass through single file, but the promise of what lay beyond pushed them forward. After what seemed like hours, the passage opened into a vast chamber, the size of a cathedral. At the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, atop which rested a strange glowing object. "This is it," Rurik said, his voice barely a whisper. "This must be the artifact they worshipped, the key to everything." He approached cautiously, his hands shaking with the weight of the moment. As he reached out to touch the object, a sudden shift in the air seemed to ripple through the chamber. The temperature dropped even further, and the walls seemed to hum with energy. The team stood frozen, unsure of what was happening. Had they awoken something ancient and powerful? Or was it merely the weight of history pressing down on them? Rurik carefully reached out and touched the glowing object. The moment his fingers made contact, the entire chamber seemed to tremble. The ground beneath them rumbled, and a low, distant roar echoed through the caves. The team recoiled in shock, but Rurik remained transfixed, his hand still on the object. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice barely audible over the rumbling. The object began to pulse with a soft light, casting strange shadows on the walls. Suddenly, the stone pedestal began to sink into the ground, revealing a hidden passage beneath. "We've activated something," Rurik said, his voice full of realization. "This is it. This is the key to unlocking their civilization." The team gathered around, unsure whether to venture down the new passage or retreat. But the mystery before them was too great. Without hesitation, Rurik led the way down the newly revealed path, his heart pounding with anticipation. What they were about to uncover could change everything. The passage they discovered was narrow and winding, a stark contrast to the grand chamber they had just left. As they ventured deeper into the earth, the air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in around them. Rurik led the team, his torch flickering as it cast long shadows on the ancient stone. The deeper they went, the more they could feel the weight of the past pressing down on them. "I can't shake the feeling that we're walking in the footsteps of something powerful," Rurik said, his voice filled with unease. His voice echoed through the passage, but there was no response, only silence. The team's steps were the only sound, their footfalls muffled by the damp stone floor. "We're close," Rurik continued, his eyes scanning the path ahead. This was their final resting place, their sanctuary. We're about to uncover everything they left behind. The air thickened as the passage narrowed further, leading them into the unknown. The passage seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually they reached the end, a large circular room filled with ancient artifacts. The floor was lined with strange stones, each one bearing inscriptions that seemed to shimmer in the light. Rurik knelt down to inspect one of the stones, his fingers tracing the delicate carvings. These are the same symbols we found earlier, but they're different," he said, his voice filled with awe. The room was eerily silent, the only sound being the soft dripping of water somewhere in the distance. "This room must have been a place of worship, a sanctuary," Rurik continued. His heart raced with the realization. And these stones, they might be keys to understanding everything about this lost civilization. As he spoke, the air seemed to vibrate with energy, as if the very room itself was alive with the secrets it had kept hidden for centuries. The team gathered around the central stone, their eyes fixed on the inscriptions that Rurik had begun to decipher. "This is incredible," Rurik muttered, his voice a mixture of wonder and excitement. "These symbols, they describe a great cataclysm, a massive event that wiped out an entire civilization. But they also speak of survival, of a group that endured hidden from the world, waiting for the right time to reveal themselves again." His words hung in the air, heavy with the implications. What if they weren't just wiped out? What if they chose to vanish, to hide away for reasons we don't yet understand? The team exchanged nervous glances. The discovery was staggering, but the deeper they went, the more questions they had. "This could change everything we know about human history," Rurik said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to find more answers." The team decided to spend the next few hours in the chamber, carefully documenting everything they found. As they moved through the room, Rurik found a small alcove hidden behind a series of intricate carvings. The alcove was barely noticeable, as if it had been concealed deliberately. He pushed aside a stone, revealing an ancient chest, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. "This is it," Rurik said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is what we've been searching for." The chest was locked, but the markings on its surface seemed to correspond with the symbols they had been studying. Rurik reached out and pressed one of the symbols, and with a faint click, the chest slowly creaked open. Inside, they found an array of artifacts, golden relics, ancient scrolls, and what appeared to be a map that glowed with an ethereal light. The team gathered around, their faces filled with astonishment. This was more than they had ever imagined. As Rurik carefully examined the glowing map, his excitement grew. "This map," he said, his voice filled with awe. "It's not just a map of this region. It's a map of an entire ancient world. One that we've never seen before. These lands, they don't exist in any of our records." His hands trembled as he unfolded the scroll further. The map depicted lands that were uncharted, territories that no known civilization had explored. It was as if they had stumbled upon a forgotten part of the earth itself. "This could be the key to understanding the global reach of this ancient civilization," Rurik said, his voice steady now. "If we can follow this map, we could uncover more sites, more relics, more answers." The team was stunned into silence, their minds racing with the possibilities. "But we have to be careful," Rurik added. "This knowledge, it could change everything, but it might also bring dangers we can't even imagine." The team moved cautiously as they followed the path indicated by the ancient map. The map, with its glowing symbols and unfamiliar geography, had taken them to a remote part of the jungle, one that few had ventured to. The air was thick with humidity, and the dense foliage made every step a challenge. As they pushed forward, Rurik looked over his shoulder at the rest of the team. "Keep your eyes open," he said. "We don't know what we're walking into." His words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with the sense that they were treading on forbidden ground. The jungle around them grew darker as the trees grew taller, their massive branches intertwining above, blocking out the sunlight. The path they followed was narrow, barely visible in places, and the sense of isolation grew stronger with every step. They had entered unknown territory, territory that had been hidden from the world for millennia. As the team pressed deeper into the jungle, the landscape began to change. The trees grew even taller, and the ground beneath their feet became soft and muddy. After hours of trekking, they came to a clearing, and in the center of it stood a massive stone structure, half buried and almost completely overtaken by the jungle. Vines hung from its walls, and the surface was covered in centuries of moss and lichen. "This is it," Rurik said, his voice filled with awe. "This is what the map was leading us to." The structure, ancient and weathered, was unlike anything they had seen before. Its shape was strange, with sharp angles and towering columns. The carvings on its walls were more elaborate than any of the symbols they had studied. "It looks like a temple," one of the team members said. "But it's unlike anything we know." Rurik nodded, his excitement palpable. "Let's find out what's inside." As they carefully explored the stone structure, Rurik and his team discovered an entrance, hidden beneath a tangle of vines. The door, made of massive stone slabs, was covered in symbols that glowed faintly under the touch of their torches. "These carvings," Rurik began, tracing one with his finger. "They match the symbols we found inside the cave. This must be the entrance to the inner sanctum." With great effort, the team managed to push open the heavy stone door. It creaked as it moved, revealing a dark passage leading deep into the heart of the structure. The air that escaped was cool, filled with the smell of earth, and something else, something ancient, as though the passage had been sealed for centuries. "This is it," Rurik said, his voice low but filled with excitement. "We're about to uncover the final secrets of this lost civilization." The passage was narrow and winding, with walls that seemed to close in around them. The air grew colder as they descended deeper, and the faint glow of their torches illuminated only small sections of the walls, revealing ancient murals and carvings. As they reached the end of the passage, the ground suddenly dropped, leading into a cavernous chamber. The sight before them took their breath away. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone pedestal, bathed in a soft, otherworldly light. On the pedestal rested an object, an orb, glowing with an eerie blue light. The air around it seemed to shimmer. Rurik approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. "Why, this," he whispered. "This is it. The artifact we've been searching for. The key to understanding everything." As he stepped closer, the ground beneath their feet rumbled, and the chamber seemed to come alive. Rurik stepped forward, his hands trembling as he reached for the orb. The moment his fingers touched it, the ground shook violently, and the orb pulsed with an intense blue light. The walls of the chamber began to glow, revealing more ancient symbols and hidden pathways that had been concealed for centuries. A low, rumbling sound filled the air, as if the very structure of the temple was awakening. "We've triggered something," one of the team members said, panic creeping into their voice. "Rurik, what have you done?" But Rurik, still holding the orb, was mesmerized. "No, this is what we came for. This is the key to unlocking their knowledge." The light from the orb intensified, and the entire chamber seemed to vibrate. The team backed away, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, the ceiling above them began to crack, and pieces of stone started to fall. "We need to get out of here," Rurik shouted, but it was too late. The temple was alive, and it was not going to let them leave so easily. The tremors of the temple grew stronger, sending waves of panic through the team. Rurik held onto the orb, as if it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. The walls groaned and cracked, and the ground beneath them seemed to shift. "We need to leave, now," one of the team members screamed, but Rurik barely heard him. His mind raced, overwhelmed by the realization that they had just awakened something far more powerful than they could comprehend. "It's alive," he whispered, the words tumbling from his lips. "This temple, this civilization, they were waiting for us." The rumbling grew louder, and the stone beneath their feet began to crumble. "Get to the exit," Rurik shouted, snapping out of his trance. The team scrambled toward the narrow passage they had come from, but the ground was collapsing faster than they could move. The walls were closing in, and the temple itself seemed to be fighting them, its ancient power stirring to life once again. Rurik led the team as they dashed through the narrow passageway, the shaking of the temple nearly knocking them off their feet. The walls trembled with every step they took, and dust and debris fell from the ceiling like rain. "It's too late," Rurik said, panting. "We've triggered something we can't undo." The sound of the temple's collapse echoed in the distance as they rounded a corner, their torchlight casting long shadows. "We have to reach the surface," he added, looking back over his shoulder. But even as he spoke, the path behind them seemed to close off, with stone blocks falling and sealing them in. The ground beneath their feet began to crack, and the air grew thick with the scent of smoke and burning stone. "Hurry!" Rurik shouted. "If we don't make it out now, we're finished." They pushed forward, knowing that their only chance of survival was to escape before the entire temple came down around them. Finally, they emerged into the open air, gasping for breath. The jungle outside was eerily quiet, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The team stumbled into the clearing, looking back at the temple, which now seemed to be crumbling into the earth. Rurik dropped to his knees, still holding the orb. "We made it," he muttered, his voice shaky. "But at what cost?" The temple was now nothing more than a pile of rubble, its secrets buried once again beneath the earth. Rurik stood, his eyes dark with a mixture of regret and awe. "We may have uncovered the lost civilization, but some things should remain forgotten," he said. The orb, still glowing faintly, was now the only trace of their discovery. The rest of the team gathered around him, their faces filled with disbelief. "What do we do with it now?" one of them asked, looking at the orb. Rurik stared at the object in his hands, unsure of the answer. "We can't let it fall into the wrong hands," he replied grimly. With the temple now reduced to rubble, the team made their way back through the jungle, their minds heavy with the weight of what they had uncovered and lost. The orb, now carefully wrapped in cloth, was the only evidence of their discovery. As they trekked through the dense jungle, Rurik's thoughts kept returning to the power they had awakened. What if this is just the beginning? He wondered aloud. What if there are more temples, more artifacts hidden across the globe? The idea sent a shiver down his spine. They had uncovered a glimpse of an ancient civilization, but there was so much more out there. And the possibility that others might seek these artifacts sent a pang of fear through him. We have to keep this secret, Rurik said, his voice firm. For now, we need to get back and report our findings. But we can't tell the world about what we've uncovered. Not yet. The rest of the team nodded, knowing that they had touched something far larger than themselves, something that could change everything. As they finally reached the edge of the jungle, Rurik turned back to look at the forest one last time. The temple was gone, buried beneath the earth, but the knowledge it held lingered in the back of his mind. The world had no idea what they had just uncovered. The ancient civilization, with its powerful artifacts and secrets, was lost once again. But Rurik knew that it wasn't the end. We will return, he muttered to himself. There's more to find. As the team emerged into the open, the sun was setting, casting a fiery glow across the horizon. The jungle behind them seemed like a distant memory, the ancient world now a part of the past. But Rurik's journey had only just begun. This is far from over, he said quietly, as the team made their way back to civilization, the orb still glowing faintly in his hands. Back in civilization, the weight of their discovery began to sink in. The team gathered in the small office that Rurik had rented in the nearest city, maps and documents spread across the table. The orb was safely secured in a locked box, resting on the table. Everyone sat in tense silence, still processing everything that had happened. We've just scratched the surface, Rurik said, his voice calm but filled with an underlying intensity. The world isn't ready for what we've uncovered. We need to understand what this civilization was capable of before we share anything. He glanced at the orb, which seemed to pulse faintly under the dim light of the room. We need to decode these symbols. If we're right about the map, there's more out there. More artifacts, more temples. And I have a feeling someone else might be searching for them too. The team exchanged uneasy glances. The world they had uncovered was far bigger and far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The next few weeks were spent trying to decode the symbols and interpret the map they had found. Rurik, along with the linguist and historians on the team, worked tirelessly, studying the ancient texts and the carvings on the orb. It's a language, the linguist said one day, her voice tinged with excitement. But it's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's as though it's part of a forgotten system, something older than anything we know. Rurik nodded, running his fingers through his hair in frustration. This civilization, they were far more advanced than we thought. The map isn't just a guide, it's a record of everything they knew, and possibly a warning. He paused, looking at the others. If we follow this map, we might uncover more than we can handle. But we don't have a choice. We need to go back. The team agreed, and with their research complete, they began making plans for another expedition, one that would take them to the next uncharted location. As the team prepared for the next leg of their journey, a sudden and unexpected threat emerged. One evening, as Rurik was reviewing the expedition plans, a shadowy figure approached his team's camp. A man in a dark coat, with sharp eyes and an air of authority, appeared without warning. "Dr. Rurik, I assume?" the stranger said, his voice cold. "You have something that belongs to us." Rurik's heart sank as he recognized the man's tone. It was the same as the one who had been tracking their discoveries from the start. "Who are you?" Rurik demanded. The man smirked. "Let's just say I'm with an organization that has its own interests in your findings. And trust me, we don't want to share." The tension in the air thickened as the team stood in defensive positions, realizing they were no longer the only ones searching for the lost civilization's secrets. The confrontation grew more intense as the stranger stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Rurik. "You don't understand the power you've uncovered," he said coldly. That artifact. He gestured to the locked box on the table. It's not just a map, not just a key. It's a tool we need to reshape the world. Rurik's eyes narrowed. What are you planning? The stranger's smile widened. That's not for you to know, Dr. Rurik. You just need to hand over the orb, and we'll be on our way. But Rurik, now fully understanding the gravity of their situation, shook his head. No, we won't be part of whatever you're planning. The tension in the air was thick, and the rest of the team stood firm, unwilling to back down. Then you leave us no choice, the stranger said ominously, and Rurik knew they had just crossed a line. There would be no turning back from this confrontation. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the tense silence. The stranger's eyes flickered with annoyance, but before he could react, a group of armed men emerged from the jungle surrounding the camp. Rurik's heart raced as he realized they were completely outnumbered. We can't fight them off, Rurik whispered, his voice tight. We need to get out now. The team quickly grabbed the orb and their essential gear, but it was clear the situation was deteriorating fast. As the stranger moved closer, Rurik made a decision. We'll give them the orb, he said, his voice filled with resolve. But we'll find another way. We'll beat them at their own game. With no time to waste, Rurik led the team into the dense jungle, weaving through the trees as quickly as they could. The stranger's men gave chase, but Rurik was determined. He knew the stakes had never been higher, and the secrets they uncovered were too important to let slip into the wrong hands. The chase through the jungle was relentless. Rurik and his team moved swiftly, cutting through the dense underbrush as the armed men closed in behind them. Sweat poured down Rurik's face, his breath coming in quick gasps. He could hear the pursuit growing closer, the crack of branches and the sound of heavy boots on the forest floor. Keep moving, he shouted, glancing back at his team. The orb, now tucked away in a bag, felt like a ticking time bomb in his hands. Every step they took brought them deeper into the jungle, but it was clear they were being hunted. They needed a plan, and fast. We have to make it to the river, Rurik said, his voice tense. We can lose them there. But the jungle seemed to stretch on endlessly, and time was running out. The trees above them rustled as something moved closer, and the sound of distant voices told Rurik that they were being encircled. They had to act now, or they wouldn't escape. As they reached the edge of the jungle, the river came into view, fast-moving and deep, the water flowing relentlessly. Rurik's eyes flicked to the far bank, where thick foliage lined the shore. We cross here, he said, pointing to a narrow part of the river. If we can get across, we can lose them in the forest on the other side. But the team hesitated. The water was cold and fast, and the current looked strong. What if we don't make it? One of the team members asked, her voice filled with doubt. Rurik's gaze hardened. We don't have a choice. We can't let them take the orb. Without another word, Rurik plunged into the water, the cold current instantly gripping him. He fought against it, struggling to keep his footing as he pushed forward. One by one the others followed, the sound of rushing water filling the air. But the enemy was not far behind. They made it to the opposite bank, but the enemy was already closing in. As Rurik and his team emerged from the water, dripping and exhausted, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush behind them. The river had given them some distance, but not nearly enough. Rurik spun around, his hand reaching for the pistol at his belt. Get down, he shouted. A hail of gunfire erupted from the trees, the sound echoing through the jungle. The team scattered, diving into the thick foliage for cover. Rurik crouched low, trying to steady his breathing as he watched the enemy approach. We can't stay here, he muttered to himself. We need to split up. If they think they're chasing all of us, they'll be less likely to catch us. He signaled to the team to follow his lead, and one by one they moved into the trees, disappearing into the dense jungle. The hunt was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. As the enemy closed in, Rurik and his team remained silent, using the cover of the jungle to move deeper into the wilderness. The pursuit grew more frantic, but Rurik had a plan. We need to create a distraction, he said in a low whisper. He turned to one of the team members, signaling for them to move toward a patch of dry leaves near the river. Together, they set up a small fire and used the remaining supplies to create smoke. The wind picked up, and the smoke quickly spread through the jungle, making it harder for the enemy to track them. "Now," Rurik ordered. The team moved quickly, slipping through the trees and taking an alternate route to the north. The smoke provided a cover, but they could still hear their pursuers getting closer. The jungle was now their battleground, and the stakes were higher than ever. They had to move fast, or be caught. The smoke served its purpose. With their pursuers distracted, Rurik and his team managed to slip through the dense jungle and reach a small clearing. As they stopped to catch their breath, Rurik felt the weight of the orb in his bag, still glowing faintly. They were safe, for now. But the realization of what they had just done began to settle in. "We've barely escaped," one of the team members said, panting. "But we need to figure out what to do with the orb. It's too powerful." Rurik nodded, his mind racing. "We can't let it fall into the wrong hands," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "But we can't keep running forever." The jungle around them seemed still, but Rurik knew they had only delayed the inevitable. The search for the orb was far from over, and there were forces out there that would stop at nothing to claim it. "We'll keep moving," Rurik said firmly. "And we'll make sure this ancient knowledge doesn't fall into the wrong hands."